half bad, is it? That hymn? It's pretty good. And it tells such a beautiful story. And I just think about that cold and snow of winter we had. Today's text is from Luke chapter 24. This is the final chapter of the Gospel of Luke. This tells the story of Jesus after the resurrection. This is the 50 days between Easter and Pentecost. Pentecost is next Sunday. And right now we are celebrating the Ascension Sunday. So Luke 24 describes the last days of Jesus on earth after the resurrection. At the beginning of Luke, there's the story of the women who come to the tomb and find it empty. Then there is the story of Jesus encountering two disciples who are walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus. One of them is named Cleophas. The other disciple is not named. So I kind of went digging to ask, who is that? Who do people think it was that was walking with Cleophas? And the best answer I could get was, it was Cleophas's wife. It was a man and a woman walking from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and all of a sudden a stranger comes to them. In some art, the stranger is pictured wearing a hat, because they figure, how could they not have recognized Jesus? But anyway, the two people are walking. Jesus comes up to them and says, "Can I join you?" And they say, "Sure." And Jesus says, "Why does everybody look so sad?" And they say, "Well, you don't know what happened?" And they told the stranger how Jesus had been crucified, but now people were saying the tomb was empty. And Jesus kept walking with them and listening. And then when they got to Emmaus, they said, they said, "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to join us for lunch?" He says, "Sure." And then it says that Jesus was at the table. He took the bread. He blessed it. He broke it. And that was the instant they realized this was Jesus. When they saw him serving the communion. And then Jesus vanishes. And there's this great line in Luke where the Cleophas and Mary, her name was Mary. Cleophas and Mary say, "Didn't our hearts feel like they were on fire when he was with us?" And they realized it was Jesus. Then Jesus vanished. And so the disciples Cleophas and Mary go back to Jerusalem, where the 11 are. There's only 11 right now, right? And they tell them what happened, how they met this stranger that turned out to be Jesus. And then all of a sudden Jesus appears to them, to the disciples in Jerusalem. And they think it's a ghost. And he goes, "Look at my hands and my feet. Those are scars." And they're still not sure. And then he says, "You got anything to eat?" And they say, "We have some fish." And Jesus eats some fish. Ghosts don't eat fish. And so this is our scripture today. Jesus is meeting them in Jerusalem. He's appeared out of nowhere, out of the blue, to the disciples. And he's giving them this last speech. So then he said to them, "These are the words I spoke to you." Let's go to the next. That's the first point we want to make. Then he opened their minds. Then he opened their minds. So that word, opened here, is a special word. It's not merely open. It's open wide. It's open completely. It's open thoroughly. These windows are open, but they're not open wide. This is the verb in Greek that means wider, wider, wider. I have to say something indelicate. There was a word in Greek for the firstborn child. And the firstborn child was called the opener. Because the pelvis reached a new dimension because of the first child. And that's the verb here. This means to just do the splits. Jesus cracked open their minds. Jesus totally broke them open. This also reminded me that when I was a kid, there was a magazine. I don't know if it's still around, and it was a humor magazine for teenagers, and it was called Cracked. Anybody ever read Cracked? It was like a poor cousin of Mad magazine. Cracked. Open. Jesus cracked open their minds. They were more vulnerable than before. They were more aware than ever before. They were more sensitive than ever before. They were more merciful than ever before. They were more flexible than ever before. They were more beautifully confused than ever before. And they were fine with it. Because we need our minds open. We get into patterns and we've got everything locked down. And we have the same thing for breakfast. And we get up at the same time. And our body functions operate with these very strict patterns. And sometimes Jesus wants to crack open our hard shells. You ever heard of a hard shell Baptist? There's such a thing. A hard shell Baptist is a Baptist who is a believer in a certain kind of Calvinism that says that God's already planned everything that ever happens and we're just following the script. And there's also soft shell Baptists. And soft shell, excuse me, soft shell, who knows what a soft shell Baptist is? The soft shell Baptists think you have some choices. But some of you, God bless you, have got hard shells. And Christ wants to crack you open so that you have an open mind and an open heart, open eyes, open ears. It's not easy to be so open. It hurts more. Resurrection cracks open the hard shells of our Easter egg. Resurrection cracks open the box of possible. Recently, I've been thinking about the way we structure our lives. We all have all our things in place. We have a house. I don't mean a physical house. We have a spiritual house. We have a foundation. Our health, our network of family and friends. Then we have a first floor. We have an income. We have a job. We have resources. Then we have, some of us have second stories of extra things. And you know, deep down, every one of us is living in a house of cards. All you would have to do is pull out one thing. We're just one flood away. We're one diagnosis away. We're one relationship loss, one job loss away. We all live in a house of cards. But what is that one card? What's the joker? What is that ace that we have that won't fall no matter what? And you know, the crazy thing is, when it's all said and done, the only thing is faith in God. That's it. All those other things that we think are secure and we pretend are secure and we tell each other are secure, they're not. They're not. The only thing finally we have, the ace, is our faith that God didn't go to all the trouble of creating a world just to break our hearts. That there is a tomorrow, whether it's here or whether it is in heaven, and that God loves us. Faith. The ace we have is faith in the Lord, who sees us with such compassion, who knows us and loves us. Some of you have met Mother Olga Yakov, my Roman Catholic nun friend. How did I ever end up with a nun as a friend? I saw her yesterday. And she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, Greg." You know, she's about this big. And she looked at me and she says, "Oh, Greg." I mean, she's like my own personal Mother Teresa. She's such a saint. She goes, "Oh, Greg, you are so great. You're this, you're that. I know your heart." And I'm thinking, wow. Oh, I love looking at myself in the mirror of her esteem. That's when I thought, she's mirroring God. Can you believe that? Could you imagine that there is, in God's eyes, that's who you are? It's you at your best. It's you at your most beautiful. It's you with all the promise you ever had. That's how God sees you. Can you look in that mirror? Look in the mirror of Christ and see yourself. I mean, it's so scary sometimes when you think about the mirror of the media and you think about young people and how they're looking at these images all the time, and the images say you have to look like this, which is kind of perfect. You have to have a certain body. You have to have certain hair. You have to have certain style. And these kids are bombarded with ads all day long. We even give them ads in school. And they look in that mirror and they say, "I don't measure up. I'm not as beautiful as that image." And oh, it's a tough thing we've given them. When the true mirror we should be looking at is Jesus. And when we see ourselves in Jesus' eyes, we see ourselves loved. Are you open? Are you crazy enough to look in the mirror of Christ? Now, the next point. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Oh, well, we didn't. There was another part. And it says that he led them as far as Bethany. Oh, yeah. Then he led them out as far as Bethany. Bethany is on the Mount of Olives. It's about 1.5 miles from the city walls of Jerusalem. Bethany is so interesting in the Bible. You know, Jesus comes to Jerusalem for Holy Week. All the big events. He goes to the temple. He throws the money changers out. They have Palm Sunday. Of course, there's the Last Supper, the crucifixion. Everything happens in Jerusalem. Bethany is where Jesus spends the nights that week. Jesus doesn't actually prefer to be in Jerusalem. Jesus likes to stay 1.5 miles outside of town in Bethany. Do you ever do that? Do you ever follow that strategy? There's the big game. There's the big event. And you're going to stay 10 miles away. You want to be part of it, but you're not right in the middle of it. That's why Jesus is in Bethany. Bethany is where the home of Lazarus and Mary and Martha was. Bethany is where that woman anointed Jesus' feet with oil and dried his feet with her hair. Bethany. And I think it's interesting that Jesus never fully loves and gets into Jerusalem. He stays at Bethany. Jesus doesn't, well, what do I know about Jesus? You know, I'm sounding like one of those guys on TV that knows everything. You know, I have to be humble here. But here's my impression. That Jesus doesn't really like the holy cities and the headquarters and the official temples. Jesus would prefer to be in Bethany. Jesus would prefer to be just a little bit outside. Not right in the establishment. That's where you find Jesus. You know, I've often thought, if there was this special city on the planet Earth that was the capital of the whole planet. Can you imagine with me the capital of planet Earth? And they'd have a big football stadium. And that's where they play the World Cup. And they'd have the United Nations. And then you'd go down this boulevard and it would be called the Parliament of World Religions. And on each side of this boulevard would be all the great temples and sanctuaries and churches on the planet Earth. There'd be St. Peter's. There'd be the Mormon, whatever they call it, tabernacle. There'd be the Taj Mahal. All the great religious structures would be on this boulevard. Now let's say we're taking the tour. Where do you think God would be on that street? Where do you think Jesus would be on that street? Which one of those official, special? But while you're hurrying in and out of the big sanctuaries, you'd hear this little bird outside going from tree to tree, singing, free. That's where God is. Not inside. God's in Bethany, not Jerusalem. And do I get one more verse? All right. And so the final point, we have to get to this. He was carried up into heaven. The ascension. All of a sudden, Jesus isn't there. I don't know how to imagine this. Did they see him rise, or did they just see him not there? What is Ascension, other than the capital of Paraguay? Other than a special religious holiday? Well, if we were to go on in the Gospel of Luke, don't change it. In the Gospel of Luke, and this will be next week's text, it's the day of Pentecost. And 2 angels come to where the disciples are and say to them, "Why do you keep looking up into heaven? Christ is gone, but now Christ is here in the Spirit." What if Ascension was just not something that happened one day? What if Ascension wasn't a special, miraculous spectacle? What if Ascension was our mission, our game plan, our way of life? What if we tried to live so that we could hold our heads up high and live skyward, live Godward, live heavenward? What if Ascension is a way of walking around, permeated by grace, to live with hearts unfolded like flowers before the sun, open, with all the dignity God gave us? What if Ascension were meant to live bouncing and buoyant, dewy, full of sap? Isaiah 40. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall, what shall they do, Antonio? Mount up on wings like eagles. You told me about that last week.
Yes, sir.
What if Ascension wasn't just a day on the religious calendar? What if Ascension was our posture? What if we felt our spirits elevated, ready to fly? It's from the Messiah. Lift up your heads, O gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? It's the Christ inside you. And so today, on Ascension Sunday, our task is to live with heads high, Godward, skyward, with all the dignity that God gave us. What are we singing here, Peter?
Number 420.
420. What's it called?
Jesus,
Jesus, the
the very thought of
very thought of thee with sweetness fills my upper chest.